Karma. When did a two-faced friend get wrecked by their own mouth? Story 1. I had this friend named Alex who always acted like my biggest supporter in public. He complimented my art constantly, told others how talented I was, and even brought people to my booth when I sold at local markets. But behind my back, he'd tell mutual friends I was delusional for thinking I could make it as a full-time artist. One even slipped and showed me a screenshot of him calling my work Pinterest garbage with a price tag. I didn't confront him at first. I just waited. Then, one day, our mutual friend Emily invited both of us to a dinner party. Alex didn't realize she had invited a local gallery owner who was looking for new artists. He spent most of the night trashing me, saying things like, "She only gets sympathy sales," and "I wouldn't be surprised if she traced half her stuff." What he didn't know was that Emily had already shown my portfolio to the gallery owner. And the owner? He was meant to meet me that night. So mid-rant, the gallery owner asked, "Wait, you're the one who does the surrealist acrylics? The cityscapes in blue and gold?" I nodded. He turned to Alex and said, "Well, this is awkward. I came tonight specifically to offer her a showing." The silence that followed? Blissful. I got the showing. Alex stopped coming around after that. Story 2. My ex-friend Lauren was the queen of sugar-coated venom. She'd always say, "I'm just looking out for you," right before criticizing everything from my career to my boyfriend. She told people I was desperate for staying with a guy who didn't make six figures, said I settled because I was insecure. What she didn't know was that my boyfriend and I were saving to buy a house together, quietly, without telling anyone. Then came my engagement party. Everyone was there, including Lauren. She walked up to my fiancé in front of a small group and said, "I still can't believe she's marrying you. I thought she'd go for someone a bit more accomplished." Without skipping a beat, my fiancé smiled and replied, "Good thing we're building a two-story accomplishment with a pool then." And right then, my cousin, who'd overheard Lauren's earlier insults, pulled out her phone and played a voice recording of Lauren trashing me from earlier that week. She tried to say it was a joke, but no one was laughing. People walked away from her mid-sentence. She left in tears, and I never heard from her again. Story 3. In high school, my best friend Nate was charming, but toxic. We were close until senior year when I noticed a shift. He'd copy my homework, tell people he was the brains in our duo, then spread rumors that I cheated on tests. Still, I kept quiet until college interviews started. We both applied to the same top-tier university. During a group interview, Nate tried to one-up me. He bragged about organizing a major school project I'd actually done most of the work for. The interviewer asked me about my involvement, and I just said, "I can show you the files. My name is on every draft." Then the interviewer asked Nate to elaborate on his timeline of the project. He fumbled, got key dates wrong, even mixed up our teacher's name. The other students noticed. One whispered, "Wasn't that her project?" When we left the room, he snapped, "Why didn't you back me up?" I said, "I thought you said you did all the work." Needless to say, he didn't get in. I did. Story 4. Maya and I worked at the same PR agency. At first, she seemed like a supportive colleague, but over time, I noticed strange things. Clients would suddenly cancel meetings with me, or I'd find out about deadlines after they passed. Turns out Maya was telling clients I was disorganized and forgetful, then swooping in to save the projects. Classic sabotage. One day, she left a Slack window open on the shared computer during a client presentation. Our manager walked in just in time to see a message that said, "Don't worry, I've got this. She'll probably forget again, LOL." Our manager paused, looked at me, and asked if I forgot the task. I replied, "Nope, sent it over this morning. Want me to pull up the time-stamped email?" I did, right there. It was sent at 8:14 a.m. Maya tried to recover, but it was too late. The manager looked at her and just said, "We'll talk later." She was quietly reassigned the next week. I was promoted a month later. Story 5. Back in college, I had a roommate named Kevin who acted like my best friend. He laughed at my jokes, shared food, always said, "You're like a brother, man." Turns out, behind my back, he was telling people I was messy, lazy, and stole from him. None of it was true. He even claimed I stole his AirPods. Then one day, while I was in the dorm alone, I heard a loud knock. Campus security. Kevin had told them again I was stealing his stuff. They searched the room and didn't find anything, until one of the officers opened Kevin's drawer and found my missing headphones, still labeled with my initials. They paused. "These yours?" I nodded. Kevin walked in right then, saw what was happening, and froze. The security officer held them up and asked, "Want to explain why his property is in your drawer?" Kevin stammered some garbage about borrowing them. They wrote up a report. He didn't get kicked out, but our RA moved him to a different dorm and word spread fast. For the rest of the semester, people called him Sticky Fingers. He never had another roommate after that. Story 6. I used to hang out with a friend named Courtney. Gorgeous, charming, and extremely good at pretending to be nice. But she had a habit of talking trash about everyone behind their backs. I always wondered what she said about me, but she'd flash a fake smile and say, "You're different." Spoiler, I wasn't. One day my boyfriend invited her to a group dinner without telling me. She showed up surprised but played it cool. Midway through, she went to the restroom, leaving her phone at the table. A message popped up from our mutual friend Hannah. "Did you tell her yet? I still can't believe you slept with him." I didn't touch the phone, but I definitely saw it. Later that night, I asked her directly. Her face went pale. She tried the usual, "It was a mistake. He came on to me," etc. But what she didn't know, the restaurant had a mirrored wall behind our table. And when she was texting in the bathroom, my friend across the room had been watching the entire screen over her shoulder. She even took photos of the messages reflected in the glass. I showed them to my boyfriend. He confessed. Courtney's reputation was destroyed overnight. She lost nearly every mutual friend. Two-faced, never looked so exposed. Story 7. I was in a theater program with this guy named Julian. He was talented, no doubt, but also incredibly manipulative. He'd pretend to help classmates memorize lines only to later mock them to others, calling them clueless or amateur. He'd always tell me how great my monologues were, until I overheard him one night outside rehearsal. He was laughing with some others, saying, "She just overacts and cries. It's not talent, it's trauma." Funny thing is, our final project was a group showcase. Everyone got to vote anonymously on who should represent us in the city competition. Julian, of course, voted for himself. What he didn't know was that everyone else had chosen me. He tried to sabotage it, told the organizers I was too unstable. But then a teacher stepped in and said, "Funny you'd say that, because she just scored the highest peer reviews of anyone here." I performed, won, and got an internship with a national company. Julian? He was asked to leave the program after it came out. He'd tried to manipulate the faculty selection process. Story 8. My friend, Zach, had this thing where he'd latch onto your hobbies just to compete. I started hiking. Suddenly he was a mountaineer. I took up photography. He started calling himself a visual storyteller. Eventually, I got into drone videography and began posting my stuff online. It picked up traction. Brands reached out. I got some gigs, even a few small sponsorships. Zach couldn't stand it. He started mocking my content behind my back, calling it wannabe travel vlogging and saying I was cringe for chasing influencer clout. I didn't react. Instead, I entered a contest run by a major outdoors brand. You had to submit a short drone film. Zach did too. A week later, they announced the winners. I got first place. Zach didn't even place. Here's the kicker. Someone leaked the judge's commentary, and Zach's submission was flagged because part of it used my footage from an old collab without credit. He was disqualified for plagiarism. His account got a warning strike. And the best part? My video ended with a shot of us standing on a cliff. The last frame? Just me, after editing him out. Story 9. There was this girl, Talia, in our study group who always played both sides. She'd act like your biggest supporter in private, but twist your words in other groups. She once told me, "Don't worry, I've got your back in the debate." The debate was a class event, one side against another on a current issue. Talia and I were teammates. But when the discussion began, she sided against me in front of the professor, acting like I was confused and misinformed. She tried to frame it as a friendly disagreement, but it was calculated. After class, I found out she had done the same to 2 other people in past projects to make herself look like the only competent one. So for the final assignment, the professor made us all submit individual reflections. I laid everything out. Dates, screenshots, transcripts of our planning sessions, all showing how she'd flip-flopped. Turns out the professor had already suspected her. My notes confirmed it. She lost points for dishonest conduct. I got extra credit for clarity and integrity. After that, she was left out of every study group, and every professor seemed a bit less friendly to her after. Story 10. Eric was the kind of guy who'd help you move, bring you soup when you were sick, then talk behind your back about how needy you were. I found out from a coworker that Eric had been telling our mutual friends that I was struggling with depression. True, and that I milked it for sympathy. Definitely false. He said I used it as an excuse to avoid socializing or help. What he didn't know? I'd already been seeing a therapist and was actually invited to speak on a mental health panel at work. During the panel, I shared my story honestly, including how someone close to me tried to use my condition to discredit me. I didn't name him, but people knew. Then came the Q&A. Someone asked, "What would you say to someone who calls mental health struggles a crutch?" I looked at Eric, dead in the eye, and said, "I'd say they're projecting weakness because they don't have the courage to deal with their own." The room fell silent. Eric turned red and left halfway through. A few weeks later, he posted a rant online about cancel culture, but by then, most people had unfollowed him anyway. Story 11. Back in my freshman year of college, I became friends with a guy named Jared. He was friendly at first, but loved playing the humble genius role. He'd praise you to your face and then go off calling you an idiot when you weren't around. We both ended up in the same tech entrepreneurship club. Jared told everyone I wasn't cut out for real innovation and that my app idea, a tool for helping dyslexic students, was sweet but pointless. What he didn't know was that I had already partnered with a professor to refine it into a prototype, and one of my test users was the daughter of the club's alumni sponsor. During our final pitch presentation, Jared smugly presented some overly complicated crypto-based mess, filled with buzzwords. When it was my turn, I calmly walked through my app and showed a clip of the sponsor's daughter using it. The room got quiet. People clapped. The sponsor wiped away tears and said, "That's the kind of tech the world needs." Jared made a joke. Sure, if the world wants another feel-good charity case, that was his fatal line. The sponsor stood up and said, "It's not charity when you solve a real problem, unlike your vaporware." Jared didn't get funding. I did. Karma, clean, and brutal. Story 12. Sasha and I were co-workers in a high-end wedding planning agency. She acted super sweet in meetings, always saying we made a great team. Meanwhile, she would quietly take credit for my vendor contacts, my flower designs, even emails I wrote. I didn't say anything until she pushed too far. She told a VIP client that I had messed up the linen order for their reception. She did it in a way that seemed concerned, like, "I just want to be transparent." The bride flipped out. My boss pulled me into a meeting, furious. What Sasha didn't expect, I had email confirmation that she had changed the order last minute. I printed it. I printed the invoice. I printed the time-stamped Slack conversation. I walked into the meeting and handed my boss a neat little folder labeled Receipts. The boss called Sasha in, watched her squirm through 5 minutes of excuses before saying, "You lied about a client order and blamed your teammate." Sasha was fired before the end of the day. I was promoted a month later. She blocked me on everything, but I framed the thank you card from that bride and put it on my desk. Story 13. There was this guy in my law school cohort, Derek. Smart, polished, and fake as hell. He'd always tell people how impressive I was, then undermine me in study groups, make offhand comments like, "You're lucky you're good-looking, you'll probably charm juries." He played it cool. Until one day in trial practice class, we were paired to do a mock court argument. I knew he'd try to sabotage me, so I came prepared. He went first and started making patronizing jokes like, "My opposing counsel will try to distract you with emotion instead of logic." People laughed awkwardly. Then I stood up. I opened with, "Since my opponent has chosen to argue with arrogance rather than evidence, allow me to redirect us to the facts." The professor literally choked on his coffee. I dismantled his entire argument, clearly, calmly, and without a single insult. When I was done, the room clapped. Derek turned beet red. Later that week, the professor used my argument as an example in class and pulled me aside to encourage me to apply for clerkships early. "Derek," He never partnered with anyone again after that semester. Story 14. In my friend group, we had this guy named Ryan, who loved being the center of attention. He was always supportive in person, but behind closed doors, he was the source of nearly every rumor. I found out he'd been telling my crush that I was clingy, emotionally unstable, and probably going to confess to her like a middle schooler. He said all this during a group gaming night, into an open voice chat. What he didn't realize was that I had joined the chat silently and heard everything. I didn't confront him. I let it sit. A few days later, we were hanging out with that same girl and a few friends. Someone brought up honesty in friendships. I casually said, "Yeah, like how you tell people their crush is unstable behind their back." He froze. "What?" I added. "Yeah, Ryan. What was it you said? Probably going to confess like a middle schooler?" I quoted him verbatim. The girl's face dropped. Another friend muttered, "Wow, dude." He tried to laugh it off, but no one bought it. Within a month, he was edged out of every group chat we had. Karma, served with a mic. Story 15. Back in my first job out of college, I became close with a girl named Lila. She was older, experienced, and acted like a mentor, until I started getting recognition. Suddenly, she wasn't so friendly. She started planting doubts in my manager's ear, that I was disorganized, missed deadlines, and wasn't ready for client-facing work. But I knew how she operated, so I set traps, CC'd my manager on completed projects, logged every task in our shared workspace with timestamps, and even screen-recorded a Zoom call where Lila forgot she told me to delay a deliverable. Then one day the manager pulled us both in. Lila accused me, again, of missing a deadline. I calmly said, "Let me pull up the video," and played the clip of her telling me to push the date. Her face went white. Manager just said, "You've been caught in too many contradictions, Lila. We're done here." Lila was let go the next week. I took over her client accounts. The clients preferred me anyway. Story 16. In my early 20s, I lived with 3 roommates, one of whom was a girl named Bree. She always played the role of the cool, chill roommate, always laughing, baking cookies, checking in on everyone. But behind that sugary exterior, she was a snake. She would secretly text our landlord and complain about me not doing chores, despite her literally never cleaning, and she once told our mutual friend group that I stole from her. Her proof? A missing bottle of perfume. I had never touched her stuff, but the damage was done. People pulled away from me. Then karma arrived. Bree forgot to log out of her iCloud on our shared iPad. One night, while trying to stream a show, her messages started popping up. She was messaging someone. "Ha ha, told them she stole the perfume. Can't believe they bought it. Hope this gets her out. That would be so peaceful." I took photos. I confronted her with them. Her face dropped. She cried, begged, said it was a joke. But screenshots don't lie. We showed the texts to the landlord. He kicked her out for creating a hostile environment. I got my reputation and my peace back. Story 17. Trevor and I worked at a boutique marketing agency. On the surface, he was my biggest cheerleader, always saying things like, "You're killing it," or "You should totally run the next campaign." Behind the scenes, he was whispering to management that I was difficult, that I ignored team feedback, and that my designs didn't convert. I didn't know this until I was left off a major project I had pitched. When I asked my supervisor why, she hesitated, then said Trevor had raised some concerns. That's when it clicked. So for the next month, I CC'd the team lead on everything. I logged every version of every asset. I had Slack receipts of Trevor approving designs and giving me praise. When another project came around, Trevor tried the same game. He claimed I ignored revisions and missed the mark. This time, the lead pulled out the logs and asked, "Then why did you write perfect? Let's go with this, just 3 days ago." Trevor froze. My boss gave me the project and a raise. He was quietly demoted to assistant status a week later. Story 18. In high school, I was part of the yearbook committee, and my so-called friend Becca was our editor. We used to brainstorm layouts together, and she always called me her creative soul twin. But I found out she'd been telling the rest of the team I was slow, indecisive, and didn't contribute ideas. What stung most was that she submitted our final layout idea to the principal and left my name off completely. I didn't confront her. Instead, I printed the emails where I'd suggested the designs. Word for word the same. When the final yearbook was done, we had a reveal night. The principal gave a short speech and said, "This year's standout layout came from a collaborative effort, but we'd like to recognize the person whose idea made it all happen." He said my name. Becca's face dropped. I could practically hear the blood drain from her cheeks. Later, she tried to say it was a team idea, but no one was buying it. Even our teacher said, "Credit where credit's due." She sulked the rest of the semester. Story 19. At my old job, there was this guy, Phil, who was friendly, too friendly. He'd constantly compliment people, bring in donuts, act like the office dad. But he had a nasty habit of slipping up and repeating private info. Things like, "Oh, I didn't mean to say that. I thought everyone knew." Classic gossiper. One day, he told our boss that I said I was thinking of quitting soon. Total lie. I never said anything of the sort. Boss pulled me in and asked why I hadn't communicated. I was stunned. I asked Phil when I supposedly said that. He gave some vague, "Oh, during lunch that day" excuse. Thing is, I had never had lunch with Phil, ever. And just to twist the knife, our IT guy overheard the entire conversation and said, "That's weird. She was in the data room with me that entire lunch break." Phil tried to double down, but it was useless. The boss knew then it was just gossip. 2 weeks later, Phil was moved to another department for team balance. Nobody missed him. Story 20. Elena was one of those friends who loved to stir drama but pretend she was just the messenger. "I hate to tell you this, but," was her favorite phrase. She once told our group chat that I had hooked up with someone's ex, a complete fabrication. But she said, "That's just what I heard," pretending to be concerned. Thing is, I had the receipts. I hadn't even been in town the weekend she claimed it happened. I sent a photo of the train ticket, the Airbnb, everything. That should have been enough. But I wanted more. So I created a fake Instagram account, followed her, and watched. She posted a private story. "Just started something that's gonna blow up that friend group. This is gonna be fun." I screen recorded it, showed the group. She tried to say it was a prank, but no one was laughing. One girl left the chat, another blocked her. Eventually, she was kicked out of every social circle we shared. Karma didn't just bite. This time, it took a chunk out. Story 21. My ex-friend Monica and I used to work together at a bridal boutique. She was charming to clients but ruthless behind the scenes. She'd constantly gossip about brides, mock their dress choices, and even referred to one plus-sized client as a walking tent. What she didn't know was that our manager had quietly started reviewing security footage after multiple complaints of rude staff. One day, a bride came in early to pick up her dress. Monica didn't see her and started imitating her walk for laughs in front of 2 interns. The bride saw everything. She didn't confront Monica directly. Instead, she sent an email with a timestamp saying she wanted to speak to the owner. Turns out the owner had already been suspicious. When they pulled the footage, it wasn't just the one incident. It was weeks of Monica being awful behind customers' backs. She was fired that day, but not before sending a dramatic group text calling it a setup. No one replied. No one cared. The boutique's reviews improved almost immediately. Story 22. Jake was one of those guys who always needed to feel like the smartest person in the room. We were part of a debate club, and though he complimented me constantly, I knew he didn't mean it. He'd make subtle digs. "You're good for someone who didn't grow up reading theory," or "You're surprisingly articulate." One day, we were prepping for a regional tournament. Our coach paired us together. Jake wasn't happy, and I overheard him say, "She's not strategic. She just talks fast and hopes people don't notice she's wrong." I didn't react. I just prepped harder. At the tournament, during cross-examination, he tried to grandstand with jargon and complicated rebuttals. I kept things clear, concise, and evidence-based. We won our round, barely, but the judges made it clear in the notes. She carried the argument. Her opponent was condescending and unfocused. When the rankings were posted, I was listed in the top 5 speakers. Jake didn't even make top 20. He asked me how that happened. I just smiled and said, "Maybe I talk fast." Story 23. There was a girl named Serena in my college volunteer group who acted like she was all about kindness and social justice. She was always talking about lifting other women up. But behind closed doors, she tore people down. I found out she'd been telling other volunteers I only got assigned to lead a food drive because I flirted with the coordinator. She even said I was too into the spotlight to care about actual charity. I kept quiet until the local newspaper did a story on the food drive and asked for a volunteer quote. They interviewed me and printed it alongside a candid photo, one where Serena was in the background, on her phone, while everyone else was working. Then the coordinator gave a speech at our next meeting and said, "The paper wanted to interview someone who was actually doing something." The room laughed awkwardly. Serena's face went red. A week later, she stepped back for personal reasons. No one asked her to stay. Story 24. Back in high school, I was part of a band. Our drummer, Leo, was talented but full of himself. He'd always hype me up during practice. Our lead singer is going to take us places. But I found out he was messaging our bassist complaining that I was too pitchy and shouldn't front the band. It hurt. But instead of calling him out, I suggested we all record solo practice clips for a promo video. Everyone agreed. When we played the final edit for a local showcase panel, I made sure Leo's audio was raw. No edits, no auto-tune. His timing was off. His tempo was messy. Meanwhile, the rest of us sounded tight. After the showcase, one of the judges said, "Loved the energy," though the drumming felt like it belonged in another song. Leo looked like he swallowed a battery. Our bassist pulled me aside and whispered, "That was brilliant." Leo never insulted me again, at least not where anyone could hear him. Story 25. Fiona was my friend from childhood, but in adulthood, she became a bit of a saboteur. We both worked in marketing and often attended the same networking events. One day, I applied for a job she had recommended, said it would be perfect for me. I went to the interview and everything felt off. The interviewer kept referencing things I hadn't said or done. Later, I learned Fiona had called them directly before my interview and said she wanted to give them a heads up about me being emotionally reactive under pressure. I was furious, but I waited. Months later, she applied to my company. Guess who was asked to sit in on the final interview? Me. I kept it professional. Asked her the same pressure questions she said I couldn't handle. She crumbled, fumbled her answers. Got snappy. Afterward, my manager asked, "Do you think she'd be a good fit?" I simply said, "She doesn't handle pressure well." She didn't get the job. Never brought it up again. Story 26. During my second year of university, I joined a study group with a guy named Neil. He was charming, energetic, and always said how great it was that we lifted each other up, except he didn't mean it. Behind my back, he'd tell people I was riding everyone else's work, even though I'd been the one doing most of the note summaries and flashcard prep. I found out when one of our group mates showed me screenshots of Neil bragging that he'd basically carried our last exam prep and that I would have failed without him. I didn't explode. I waited. The next group session, I brought custom quizzes. Everyone aced them, except Neil. It was obvious he hadn't studied at all. Then I pulled out a pop quiz I made that was only based on my notes. I said, "Let's do something fun." No pressure. Neil bombed it. Couldn't answer half the questions. I smiled and said, "Weird. You said I didn't contribute much, yet everyone else got these right." Silence. He left the group the next day. Story 27. In my first apartment, I had a roommate named Crystal. To my face, she acted like we were sisters. We'd cook dinner together, vent about work, even share groceries. But she had a different version of me online. One day, someone I barely knew DM'd me a Reddit post. It was from an anonymous account, but it had to be her. She described her messy roommate who always used her stuff, never paid rent on time, and made life hell. It was obviously about me. She mentioned our exact apartment layout and even specific arguments we'd never shared publicly. I was furious, but I didn't post back. Instead, I waited for rent day. I printed every Venmo receipt, every grocery split, every time-stamped message proving that she was the one behind on rent and she was the one using my things without asking. I left the folder on the kitchen table with a note. "Since Reddit's your diary, I thought you might appreciate some facts." She moved out that weekend with no goodbye. Story 28. I worked at a call center where everyone was underpaid and overstressed. Still, I got along with most people. Except Paul. Paul pretended to be my ally. He'd say things like, "You keep this place running, and you should be promoted." But I found out he'd been going to our supervisor, telling her that I took long breaks and messed up call logs. It came to a head when I got called into HR. Apparently, Paul had documented multiple infractions. But I had a feeling. I'd started screen recording my sessions weeks prior after noticing strange errors on my profile. I pulled them up in the meeting. Each incident Paul cited was either fabricated or literally his own behavior. He'd just switched the names in the report. HR's face said it all. He was suspended immediately. A week later, he returned to find his desk empty and his login revoked. I was quietly promoted to team lead. Everyone else started calling him Paul the Pretender. Story 29. My friend Nate had a reputation for being a real one. He'd always say stuff like, "I'm the guy you can count on," and he was, until things got competitive. We both applied for the same creative grant. I told him my pitch, a short film about father-son reconciliation. He acted excited and said he wouldn't be applying after all since he wasn't ready to take on a project. 2 weeks later, I found out he submitted the same concept with minor tweaks, same emotional angle, same title, just inverted. It crushed me until karma stepped in. During the finalist interviews, the panel asked him about his inspiration. He stumbled and gave vague answers. One judge who'd seen my work before said, "Didn't you post something like this last year?" I did. I had a full concept video on Vimeo from 6 months earlier. They asked me to send it in. I did. He was disqualified. I got the grant. He tried to message me later saying, "It was just a coincidence. I didn't even bother replying." Story 30. In college, I joined a startup incubator with a girl named Tara. She was friendly, encouraging, always saying, "We're in this together." We weren't. Turns out, she had been telling the program mentor that I was unprepared, slow with deadlines, and constantly distracted. She did it with a smile and even offered to take over my half of the presentation. What she didn't expect? The mentor CC'd me on the email thread. I saw everything. Her lies, her attempts to cut me out, so I prepared a full solo deck and scheduled my own meeting with the mentor. I walked through every project milestone, showed every design doc and update log with timestamps. The mentor was silent, then said, "You've done all of this alone?" I nodded. Tara got removed from the incubator. I got the funding and a shout-out at Demo Day. Tara sent me one last message. "You could have just talked to me instead of ruining me." Nah, she ruined herself, with her own words. Story 31. Liam was in my gaming guild for over a year. We talked daily, shared personal stuff, and even helped each other with real-life issues. He always had my back, or so I thought. One day I was randomly added to a private Discord where I saw a message history that made my stomach drop. Liam had been mocking me for months behind my back. He called me deadweight, said I was a sympathy pick for raids, and even made fun of me for struggling with my mom's illness. But here's the kicker. He didn't know one of the admins in that server was my cousin. That's how I got added. I took screenshots of everything and didn't say a word. The next raid night, he started his usual leader act. I casually said, "Hey, Liam, any reason you called me a liability last week?" He froze. I posted the screenshots in the guild chat. People left the voice channel mid-sentence. He tried to claim it was just jokes, but the damage was done. He was booted from the guild within the hour. A week later, his own server went inactive. Turns out people talk. Story 32. Alicia was in our friend group and always played the therapist friend role. She'd offer to listen to your problems, validate your feelings, and act like a shoulder to cry on. But she was also the leak. I once confided in her about a breakup and how insecure I felt afterward. A few days later, I got a weird text from someone I barely knew. "Sorry to hear you're still obsessed with your ex." Confused, I traced it back. Turns out, Alicia had been screen capping our private chats and sending them to other people, laughing about how dramatic I was. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I asked our friend Jenna to bait her, pretend to share a personal story and see where it ended up. 3 days later, Jenna's secret was posted as an anonymous meme on a burner Instagram account that only Alicia followed. We outed her in the group chat with proof. She left voluntarily, but not before claiming, "I was just trying to be relatable." No one bought it. Her social life imploded within a month. Story 33. I worked part-time at a bookstore during college, and one of my co-workers, Grant, was the kind of guy who played both sides. He acted supportive in person, but constantly threw coworkers under the bus to management. One day, a customer complained about a lost pre-order. Grant told our supervisor I was the one who misfiled it. Even though I hadn't even worked that shift, I didn't say anything at the time. But the next week, I saw him telling another employee, "I just make sure the right people look bad before reviews come up." So I wrote a detailed log of every task I'd completed over the last month. Timestamp. I attached camera screenshots from the POS system that showed me nowhere near the register that day. I sent it directly to our regional manager, not the store supervisor. Grant was restructured out of a job by the end of the quarter. He tried messaging me saying I ruined his career. I simply replied, "You did that yourself." Story 34. Emily and I were both bridesmaids in our best friend's wedding. She was always sweet to my face, but made constant passive-aggressive remarks. "That dress really hugs your curves," or "You're brave for wearing heels that high." I brushed it off. Then one night, I saw she'd created a private story on Instagram titled The Real Wedding Tea. And yeah, I was in it by accident. She'd been posting videos mocking our friend group, zoom-ins on people's outfits, comments like, "Trying way too hard," or "Didn't know we were going for thrift store chic." She even captioned a pic of me with "built like a lampshade." I saved everything. At the bachelorette party, I connected her phone to the Bluetooth speaker to play music. Instead, I opened her private story folder and let it autoplay. Silence. Then gasps. Then one bridesmaid said, "Wow, lampshade's got Wi-Fi, huh?" Emily left in tears. She didn't show up for the rehearsal dinner. The bride never spoke to her again. Story 35. I had a teammate named Marcus on a project during my MBA program. We were building a startup concept and pitching to actual investors. Marcus kept telling me, "You're great at the branding part. Let me handle the pitch." I later found out he was calling me just the graphics girl behind my back. Said I was useless in business talk and just there for the deck to look pretty. Fine. During pitch week, I asked our advisor for permission to do the second half of the presentation. Marcus wasn't thrilled, but couldn't object in front of faculty. When the pitch started, he led with jargon-filled, rambling nonsense. The investors looked confused. Then it was my turn. I gave a clean, precise breakdown of our actual market strategy, backed by data I'd spent weeks compiling. The lead investor turned to Marcus and asked, "So she's the graphics girl, huh?" He went pale. We got funded. Marcus got 0 credit in the write-up. He dropped out the next semester to explore solo projects. Story 36. My former friend Aiden was the guy who always talked about loyalty and having your back, but he was also the first to twist a knife when no one was looking. We both worked at a summer camp. I was new. He was a returning counselor. Everything seemed fine until I noticed my campers were getting fewer resources, games, supplies, even food items. I asked the director, and she told me someone said I was mismanaging materials. Guess who? Aiden had been feeding her subtle lies for weeks. He framed it as concern. Maybe she's overwhelmed, just trying to help. But karma was patient. Mid-season, the director decided to do unannounced checks. One afternoon, she caught Aiden unloading craft supplies meant for my group into his own stash. When she confronted him, he said, "I figured she wouldn't use them properly anyway." That was it. He was fired on the spot. I was reassigned to lead counselor for the final weeks. The kids? Thrilled. The director later told me, "Sometimes people expose themselves with just a few words." Story 37. There was this girl in my photography class named Naomi. She always gave me fake compliments like, "Your style is so raw," and "You're not afraid of imperfection." Turns out she was telling others that my work was low-effort snapshots and that I got sympathy points for being artsy poor. I only found out because one of her rants ended up screen-recorded on a group Zoom. She thought her mic was off. She ripped apart my portfolio while laughing with another student. Fast forward to our final project. We had to present a themed collection and talk through our process. I went last. When I started, I calmly said, my theme was misjudged, and every photo was based on a comment made behind my back. Then I clicked through slides titled "With Her Actual Words," paired with powerful photos that proved her wrong. The professor, stunned. The class, silent. Naomi couldn't even speak when it was over. She never returned to class again. My portfolio was chosen for the university's spring exhibit. Story 38. My friend Mason was always first to congratulate me in public and first to mock me in private. We were both in the same startup incubator, and I had landed a meeting with an investor he had been trying to reach for months. What I didn't know was that Mason had emailed the investor beforehand to warn him that I had no real traction, no product, and that I was emotionally reactive. Well, the investor forwarded me the email. I was furious, but strategic. At the meeting, the investor played along. He asked about every weakness Mason mentioned. I answered each point with data, screenshots, and a working demo of the platform Mason claimed didn't exist. When I finished, I said, "By the way, I appreciate the honesty in the email. It gave me a good idea of what to prepare for." The investor smiled and replied, "I thought you might appreciate seeing who your competitors really are." I got funding. Mason didn't even get a call back. Story 39. Angela was the classic girl's girl in our friend group. Always supportive, always cheering others on, until they weren't in the room. She had a habit of texting one person trash about another, then flipping it when confronted. I stayed quiet, until she messed with my little sister. My sister had just joined our group for the first time. That night, Angela texted me, "Why'd you bring her? She's so awkward it's painful to watch." She added laughing emojis and said she reminded her of a baby deer trying to socialize. I took a screenshot. Then I sent it to my sister and our group chat, with no context. Just the message and the name. The chat exploded. Angela tried to say her phone was stolen, then claimed it was meant as a joke. Nobody bought it. She was removed from every group chat we had. My sister got endless messages of support. Angela hasn't been seen in our circle since. Story 40. In our final year of high school, I worked on the school musical as stage manager. One of the cast members, Drew, acted super friendly with me, always saying how he respected how hard backstage worked. But I caught wind he'd been mocking me to the rest of the cast, called me stage goblin, said I was obsessed with control, and took notes like a dictator. I said nothing. Opening night, he messed up his mic placement. His pack was off, and he came to me in a panic. I fixed it, calmly, professionally. Right before curtain, the principal made an announcement thanking the crew, saying, "Some actors shine under lights. Others make sure the lights work." The whole crew got applause. Drew stood in the wings watching it all happen without him. After the show, someone handed me a card Drew had written earlier in the week, mocking me again. I handed it back and said, "Next time, mock someone who can't mute your spotlight." Story 41. Back in college, I shared a dorm suite with a girl named Jenna. She had a reputation for being sweet and generous. She baked cookies, helped with notes, and always offered a listening ear. Except she was also the campus gossip. She'd secretly tell people personal things that only came out in one-on-one conversations. I found out she'd told a mutual friend that I was probably faking anxiety for attention and too sensitive to be around real people. She didn't know I had already reported my struggles to the campus mental health office, and that I recorded my sessions for reference, which included a conversation where I literally said I didn't want anyone knowing I was in therapy, especially her. So when she brought it up again, this time saying, "You should be honest with the group about your mental health for safety," I played the recording. Right there, in the common room, her voice, my warning, her mocking me seconds later. You could hear a pin drop. She left the room and moved out a week later. Story 42. Ethan was the class clown type. Always cracking jokes, always hyping people up in public, and always low-key throwing them under the bus behind closed doors. I ran for student council president. Ethan told me he'd campaign with me, said he had connections, and even helped design my flyers. Cool, right? Turns out he made a second set of fake flyers, ugly ones with weird fonts and outdated slogans. He passed those out around school as a joke. Some even had typos on purpose. But karma came quick. One of our teachers found one of the bad flyers in her classroom and asked about it. She brought it to the admin office. I got called in, and I was honest. Said I didn't print that design, but I had a strong suspicion who did. The school checked the printer logs from the student design lab. All the fake flyers came from Ethan's account. He was barred from participating in the election process and banned from student council events. I still won, by the way, and I gave my first speech on stage with one of the fake flyers in hand. Thanks for the extra publicity, Ethan. Story 43. Laura and I were in the same art collective, where we helped plan community exhibits and fundraisers. She came off super supportive, liked all my posts, always said my sculptures were so expressive. Behind my back, she told the committee my pieces were beginner tier and not marketable, and suggested I be removed from the upcoming gallery rotation. What she didn't realize was that one of the committee members was my cousin, and she forwarded me the email. Instead of confronting her, I got clever. For the next exhibit, I submitted under a pseudonym. I used a slightly different style, just enough to mask my identity. Everyone, including Laura, raved about the work. She even said, "Whoever this is, they deserve the feature wall," and I got it. Opening night, I placed a plaque next to the installation, created by Beginner Tier, aka the artist Laura tried to remove. She left early. No one's seen her at a show since. Story 44. In my corporate job, I trained a new hire named Simon. He was eager and friendly, asked for advice, complimented my efficiency, called me his mentor. What I didn't know was that he had been emailing my boss privately, saying I was overstressed and struggling with leadership in hopes of getting me replaced as team lead. He even copied my process manual, renamed it, and submitted it to another department as his own. But karma has a good memory. My boss accidentally forwarded me an email thread. Simon had suggested that I might be better suited to a support role instead of lead. So I set a trap. During our next cross-departmental review, I presented a new system, the exact one Simon had tried to plagiarize. But this time, I included the original draft from 6 months earlier, with my name, date, and Slack logs. Then I asked, "Simon, didn't you submit something similar last week?" He looked like a ghost. My boss called him in the next day. He didn't return after lunch. Story 45. Kelsey was the definition of two-faced. We worked in the same co-working space and were building similar freelance portfolios. She always said we should collaborate, talked about women supporting women. Then I found out she was emailing my clients offering better rates and faster turnaround. She'd even called one of my regulars and said, "You know she outsources, right?" Which was a lie. So I played the long game. One of the clients she poached reached out again, unhappy with her final product. I offered to fix it for free and asked if they still had the original files. They did. I reverse-searched the images Kelsey used. They were stock photos, not even edited. One was still watermarked. The client was furious. I asked them to forward that to a few mutual contacts who'd recently signed with her. 2 weeks later, Kelsey's site was down. Her reviews disappeared. She texted me in panic mode. "Did you say something about me?" I didn't have to. Her own shortcuts and her own mouth did the work for me.